So this concept will help you read literature, non-Western literature sometimes, mostly because, it kind of depends who's in the class, depends on what your background is, where you grew up, what your cultural milieu is. But I'm going to assume that most of you grew up in the States and come from a Judeo-Christian background, although it's never the case that everyone in the class comes from that same background. And over on this side, I'm going to put non-dualistic. And over here, I'm going to say dualism. And you can take all of sort of the world religions and place them somewhere on what I see as kind of a continuum. And before I start doing that, I want to say that texts in general, religious texts in general, they're very complex, and they have pieces of them that may fall on one side or the other. So there's what I think of as a very non-dualistic moment in the Quran. It's one line, see if I can remember it. It says that God is as close as your jugular vein. And I see that as a very poetic, non-dualistic moment. So, just because I put a religion on one side doesn't mean it's not it's very monolithic or it's all homogeneous. It's of course, books are very complex. So, I have this green line, and the green line sort of represents a very dualistic way of seeing things, whereas there's heaven and then there's hell, and there is the profane, and then there's the sacred. And there's God is somewhere not where we are. So we're here, and God is somewhere else. It's not on this same area that we are in. And this breaking things up and keeping them separate fairly rigidly is a dualistic way of seeing things. And non-dualistic would be this concept of things that appear separate. At some point in the literature, they're going to get murky, and at some point it seems like, it's kind of all the same. So that what is considered sacred may look profane, and what is profane may look sacred. I can give an example. So Hinduism and Hindu literature written by Hindus. There's many different examples where. So there's a contemporary novel. I think it's written by an Indian who lives in the U.S. I actually can't remember. I haven't read it for like 15 years. And the idea is that there is a servant who would be considered low on the hierarchy, gets described in very sacred ways, divine-like. And so that flipping over what's considered low to be high, the ultimate high, is kind of non-dualistic. Okay? So Sufi literature is a branch of Islam. I actually say that mainstream Islam is fairly dualistic, like Christian thought as well. And I don't know much about Taoism, but I believe it's fairly non-dualistic. And so you can sort of see that Eastern and Buddhism is fairly non-dualistic. So I'll give an example with Buddhism or Sufism. I don't know which example is going to pop out of my mouth. Okay, so there are Sufis who show up at a gathering and they're apparently drunk. Now, that would be considered in mainstream Islam to be a very profane thing. You're not supposed to drink alcohol. And they show up and they're acting all drunk and everyone else is freaking out and like, what are the Sufis showing up drunk? And they've lost their way. And actually what the Sufis are doing in some stories is they're trying to evoke from the people sort of the worst part of themselves, to show that people have these ugly parts of themselves that they hide. And so the community is ready to like kill them. And the Sufis are like, why do you assume that we're acting in a very profane way? Maybe actually this is the most sacred. And so they question the idea of showing up drunk. This would be heretical for mainstream Islam. So that sort of questioning these distinctions is a form of non-dualistic. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, if you're approaching a non-dualistic literature from a Christian background and a culture that kind of believes in this is good and this is bad, then at some point you're going to be missing the complexity of this kind of literature. Because, like I said, the literature is going to be interested in messing with these distinctions. And you're only going to be able to see, of course, on one level. So there's a Sufi text by Attar, which you may read this term, in which the main character behaves in what everyone else sees as a bad way. And you can come in and say he's being bad, and that's one level of the text. But if that's the only level, then maybe you're missing out on several different levels that also exist. So to get the complexity of this literature, know what kind of perspective you're bringing to it, and be willing to sort of put aside, at least temporarily, your sort of dualistic way of seeing things as you're exploring this literature. This is how, I'll just give you a very everyday example, because even if you're not religious, you've sort of grown up in a culture. So I'm part of a neighborhood site, and in this neighborhood site, there's a lot of discussion about homeless people. And homeless people, in the way that a lot of people are posting, are considered highly problematic. You know, they do drugs and they leave trash all over the place and they're drunk outside people's windows. And they see themselves as up here as not problematic, and they see homeless people as down here. And what Hindu literature would be interested in doing is sort of collapsing the distinction between the person in the nice house who's complaining about, being kept up all night, and then the person who's drunk and puking outside. So how maybe are they somewhat the same? Which drives people who think this way absolutely crazy. So hopefully you won't be driven too crazy, but I want you to think about this as we read the text. Okay? I think you can do it. Enjoy.